How's it going, everyone? Coming at you today with a brand new tutorial. It's been a while, and we're going to be delving into Megascans with Blender. So I don't know if you guys have ever used Megascans before, but we're just going to do a quick little introduction to its workflow with Blender. I use it in my workflow for almost every single scene that I do, and it's a great asset to the studio here, and it's a great tool to be able to use. So if you head on over to QuickCy, you'll be on their website here, and you can start searching through their Megascans library all throughout here. But the product that you should get is Bridge. Bridge links everything together, and it comes in this app that you can see here. So when you first open it, you'll be right here. I've been working on this tutorial scene a little bit, but you'll be here and you'll see everything on the home page here. We're going to be sticking with the free section so everyone can follow along in this tutorial. Yeah. So in the free section here, you can see they've got a wide range of different options that you can choose from a scene. We're going to stick with some of the basics here. So we're going to use this broken stump, and we're also going to use the forest ground roots here, as well as the grass. So you combine all that together, and we're going to use Eevee as well for Blender 2.8. And you combine all that together, and we'll get something like this when we're all said and done with everything in the tutorial. It's very easy, very basic, but I definitely want to get the word out there of Megascans. It's very reasonably priced each month, and you get a lot of stuff. So if you are ever interested in purchasing Megascans and starting a trial with them, you'll be able to get a wide range of different options to choose from 3D models to materials and brushes with surface displacements and all that kind of stuff. This will all be available to you, but like I said, we're going to stick with the free section so everyone can follow along. Now, taking a look at the finished Blender file here again, I'll come out of full view here, and I'll show you the type of scene that we're working on here, so you can see all three of these assets brought together in Eevee. So we got the forest floor with our particle system of the grass and the tree stump here, and this is all running in real time using Eevee. And then we simply do indirect lighting here with a cube map to bake the lighting, and we'll just add other options here with bloom, ambient occlusion, screen space reflections. We'll get into all that later on. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started with Megascans and Blender. Okay, so we've got the brand new version of Blender. This is Blender 2.83. This is the current release. So anything with 2.8 and up will work with Eevee. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's just dive right into this. Not trying to make this a long tutorial at all. So yeah, let's go ahead and delete the cube and the lamp like you usually do. And we'll replace this with a plane, and we'll scale this up to about like a 10. We'll just give it enough room to work with here in the scene. Yeah, so let's go here and click on tab and then right click subdivide. We'll bring up the menu here, and I'm going to give this about 40 cuts. So lots of geometry to work with, because we really want to tighten up the vertices and make enough vertices so we can see the bump of those roots really come from the ground. And I'll show you that later when we get to it. So we're just setting that up right now. And let's go ahead and add in a subdivision subsurface as well. So we're going to bump that all the way up, but I'm going to leave the viewport a little bit lower so our viewport isn't completely shot. Okay, so now we have all this geometry to work with for our scene. Okay, let's go ahead and get the texture and materials. So when you first set up Bridge and you're in this library and you see all this stuff, you'll have to go through and have an export to Blender. Like, it'll have to be enabled. Now, if you guys want a full video on how to set up Blender with Megascans and make them merge together, go ahead and comment down below or leave a like or whatever. Just let me know that you want that, because in the settings here you have to set up a folder where everything's going to be downloaded, and you'll select your engine as well. So we've got Blender, we've got our local library path set up. That's where everything's going to be downloaded. So when we go to Bridge and we select the texture that we want, you'll have all the asset info, and then you'll have the download settings. Now, I think for free, non-paying Megascans customers, I think you guys will all have 2K. I specifically have 8K, so I'll just use that. And you can select the maps that you want. You can also change to higher resolution if you want EXR files. And the export settings, again, this is where you link up Blender. So if we want to actually export the 8K, we can do that. If we leave it at 4K, but we download 8K, this will convert the 4K, or the 8K to 4K when it sends to Blender. I know there's a lot of technical details. Again, if you guys want a full video on that, I'll make that. But for now, just follow along. So I've already downloaded this. I've already purchased it. It's free. Like I said, this whole section here is free, so you guys should be able to download and follow along. So we're just going to go ahead and click on export, export to Blender. It'll convert the textures here, and then it'll say exported successfully. Now, I'll link a video from Megascans that shows you the entire process of how to build Bridge with Blender, to link them up and to start downloading all of this stuff. So that will be down below. So we've already exported that. Let's go ahead and come back over, and let's go ahead and select that from the materials. So we'll go ahead and select that. It takes a little bit sometimes too, because it has to read all of the files. But we'll go into material view here so we can see real quick, and there we go. So it's pretty basic. But what's cool about this is when you open up the shader editor. So in the shader editor, Megascans has done about 95% of the work already, which is awesome. It has already set up the color map with the AO map for the shadows. Here's your specularity and your gloss, the normal and the bump, all plugged into where it should be. Now, the only thing that we have to change when this opens up is this guy right here. I don't like that node and what it does. I don't feel that it's completely accurate to what we're trying to do. So whenever I have that, I just delete it, and we'll replace that with a converter math. We'll drop this in here because we're going to need one for the specularity and the gloss. We'll set that to multiply, and then let's duplicate that. Plug in the color to the roughness, and just like that. Okay, now we're not really seeing anything because we don't really have any light source. Like, we can kind of see here a little bit, but not really. So again, make sure that these are on non-color. The only one that should be colored here is the actual color albedo color ramp, or color image. So you can see when we change that, we actually get a lot more glossiness in the scene, and that's where we can now play with the amount of glossiness here. So the more you turn this up, the more you'll get. So I'm going to keep it very low. I don't really want too shiny of a ground. And then this also affects the roughness. So the higher you go, the less rough it is. The lower you go, the more rough it is. Okay, so I'm just going to set this about, just go 2 and 1.4 for the top one. Now everything else is at your discretion. You can change the bump around, you can change the normal map around. It's completely up to you. I don't want to take up too much of the time though. So let's move on to the displacement. So like I said, we already set up our subdivision. Now we're going to make this not just a flat texture. We're going to actually add bump and detail to the scene. And important thing, save all the time, because dealing with high resolution textures can definitely crash Blender a lot. So we're going to go ahead and add in a displacement. We'll check new. Go ahead and click on open. And now this is where you'll have to navigate, if I can talk correctly, navigate to the folder where everything is set up. So I've already got it open up here because I've been working on it, but usually it goes to your users folder, documents, and then Megascans library. That's usually where it goes all the time. Now again, I'm going to use the 8K displacement. Again, I'm pretty sure everyone else is going to be limited to 2K if you had a free Megascans account. But we're going to go ahead and click on open for whatever displacement you have. Okay? Now you can see it starts to do all of its stuff. Now we haven't adjusted the UV map at all, but go ahead and select UV. It won't change anything because we haven't scaled anything down yet. Yeah, so let's go ahead and hit that at a 0.1. And there you go. You can start to see, let me get a little more room for us here. You can start to see the detail coming through. Very, very cool. Now let's go ahead and right click, shade smooth, so it looks a little bit nicer. And you can see why we're keeping the viewport very low. I mean, we're already at almost 500,000 vertices. Working with Megascans, for final scenes, you can have a lot of vertices. I've had scenes that I've had about 10 million vertices or so. It's been quite crazy. I'm surprised that my computer has actually survived that. But you can see when you up the viewport, the more detail you're going to get. I mean, this is basic displacement, but this is the beauty of photo scanning, because all of Megascans assets are photo scanned. So we'll leave the render high, so when we actually render, it'll do level 6. I'm just going to leave the viewport at 4. Okay? Okay, so that's our ground. That's our ground pretty much done and dusted. Let's go ahead and quickly take a sidebar and add in our environment texture. So if you click on here and then you hit E, we'll add in an environment texture. So go ahead and click on open. Now, most of these HDRs that you see here are from HDR Haven. I'll link them down below in the description as well. Awesome website to get high resolution free HDRs. Those guys know what they're doing. I use them for all HDRs in the studio here, so I can't recommend them more than that. Like, they do amazing stuff. So I'm going to use the Sunset Fairway, which again you can find on HDRI Haven, something like that. I'll link it in the description. So go ahead and click on that and we'll open that up. Cool, cool, cool. All right, let's go into rendered view so we can start to see how things are looking here with the lighting and everything. All right, looking pretty good, looking pretty good. Okay, you can start to see where we're coming in at. Now, let's get into the technical aspects real quick before we head back into the meat and potatoes of the tutorial. Now, a lot of these settings you won't see. Yours isn't going to look like this yet, but if you follow along, yours will look like this here in a second. So for color management, we're always using Filmic, and I always keep mine at a base medium contrast. When I actually render, I shoot in log, or I should say I render in log, so that way later on in Photoshop I can adjust it however I want because I shot log. I don't want to be limited to the contrast that is already in here. But for working in it and getting the technical aspects right and the look of it, I work in Filmic at base contrast. Okay. Ambient Occlusion. I always set mine to 1. The higher you go, I think the more you get, but you really don't see anything past 1 meter. I mean, until you actually get more stuff in the scene, you might see that. So let me just add in like a random cube here or something so you can kind of see. So you can see there that it's based off of the distance of that. So this cube like this wouldn't be making that big of a shadow. So like you want to increase it to give Eevee more depth and shadows, but you really don't want to go too high. So I usually just keep it at 1. I found that 1 works pretty well. Okay. And then of course, I think everyone's most favorite, I love this one, Bloom. That just gives you automatic glow to the scene. It's yeah, it's glow. Try not to go overboard with it. I try not to. It's kind of hard sometimes not to. But you can control the radius. That really doesn't do much. I think this tightens it up a little bit or something like that. I'm not sure. But Bloom is Bloom. Depth of field, you don't really have to touch. Subscript scattering, I always increase my samples. I think the default is like 8 or so. I just give a little more to it. Now, if it's something that is directly influenced with subsurface scattering, then I'll turn that up a lot, just to give it more samples. Screen space reflections, that's the big one here for glossiness and reflections. So if I turn this on and off, you can kind of see what it's doing. But really you want to turn this precision mount up. This gives more accuracy, I believe. You can adjust the roughness as well here, but make sure this is on because that's always going to give you the reflections that you're looking for. And after that, we'll delve into the indirect lighting later on when we actually set up our cube map or whatever that thing is called. But yeah, I think that is pretty much it for the settings. So your viewport should be looking about like this now. So let's go ahead and add in the rest of our stuff here. So back in Bridge, let's go back to Bridge real quick. We'll get that tree stump here. So again, I've already purchased, downloaded it, all that good stuff. So I'm just gonna go ahead and click on export. Again, you can add in, these are different levels here. So LOD 0 to 5. LOD 5 is obviously going to be the most low poly. LOD 0 is going to be the most high poly. So back here in Blender, you can see it's rotated the wrong way. So we'll rotate it along the Y by 90 degrees and bring that back up. Okay. So I'm just going to position this about right here. Kind of get those roots in the ground there a little more. Okay. Cool. There we go. It's coming along. Sweet. I'm going to move the floor here a little bit because our shot's going to be here. So I want more ground that way. All right, let's go ahead and Control Alt, number pad 0, set up our camera here. So I'm just going to double tap R to rotate along there. Just going to get a nice shot here. Cool. Okay, so camera settings, pretty basic. I'm going to focus on the tree stump. And obviously f-stop, pretty powerful with Eevee. It's really fun to play around with. It's hard for me not to go overboard with depth of field, because I like the shallow depth of field because it gives such a cool effect. But I have to constantly tell myself to pull back, you know. It's too much. It's too much depth of field. Okay, so that is the tree. Now let's look at his settings. So again, we had that little invert node that comes into it. We just have to change some settings from Megascans sometimes. That's just the reality of it. So yeah, let's just link up those two there. Now, if you didn't know how I got those so quickly, I just simply got these from the other one, Control C, go to your other asset, Control V, and they'll drop right in there. Okay. All right, so again, non-color data. For some reason, the specularity always comes in as sRGB. I don't know why, but it does that all the time from Megascans. So just change that over and you will be off to the races. Okay. Now, it's hard to tell on this lighting the type of roughness that we've got. You can kind of see it there. We don't want the tree too rough, but I do want to increase the bump there a little bit. Maybe play around with the normal amount a little bit there. Okay. Now, if we look, come out of rendered view back into here, I don't know what Megascans does, but this does not look like the most high poly model, but this is LOD 0. So I've had to play around with settings before, and basically what I found for right now is the best option is to go into edit mode with whatever 3D asset you get from Megascans. It always looks so low poly. So go into edit mode, type N to bring up the toolbar here, and we're going to change the mean increase to about a 0.3. It's very minimal, but it basically tightens up the vertices. Now you don't want to go too much because unfortunately it's triangulated. So I'll show you what I mean. So when we go and add in a subdivision subsurface, it takes a little bit to recognize this in Blender 2. It's gonna freeze here for a little bit, but we'll come back here in a second. Okay, so you can see there, it does tighten up the vertices a little bit. Let me turn it off and then turn it back on again and freeze my computer again. Okay, so you can see there, it does add more detail, but so you have to add in a subdivision subsurface to any asset you get from Megascans to really get the look of a high resolution 3D model. But you don't want to go too overboard, like I said, because when you really starting to tighten up the vertices by adding in more subdivision, you're gonna get the look of the triangulated faces. Like those are gonna be very prevalent to the scene. Okay, so you can already see here my computer's struggling. This is actually a really good computer, but it is definitely on the struggle bus right now. I'm just gonna leave that off, but in the render it'll show up. Okay, let's move on to the grass. So I'm gonna go ahead and save this, and let's head back on over to Bridge. As you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you should see these grass particles. So here is the grass. We've got all these different types of assets and all the different maps. So again, I've already downloaded it, already done all the meat and potatoes, so I'm just going to go ahead and export that to Blender. Sweet. Okay, so let's go ahead. Now it's really small and it goes into the middle of the scene, so let's go ahead and like kind of get in here. I'm gonna have to hide that tree real quick. Okay, so it's gonna come in looking like this, all these different types of particles here. So let's just move it out of the scene because we don't want it to be shown. And automatically what I'm going to do is Control G make these a collection group, okay? So let's rename this to grass. Okay, cool. So now let's bring back the tree stump here. We need to paint around the tree. So we don't want the grass shooting through the tree when we add in the particle system. So let's select our ground here real quick and weight paint. And basically we are going to paint around the tree as much as we can. Okay, it doesn't have to be exact, it doesn't have to be perfect at all. I'm gonna just get in here a little bit more because there's a big gap there. Okay. So now we can just go ahead and paint the rest of the scene here. It's lagging a little bit because I've got the subdivision on. So we'll just move that all around there just so we can get enough here. Actually, I'm going to subtract a little bit of this just to kind of add in some randomness to the scene. Because it's nature, everything is random. Okay, let's go back to object mode. And if you don't know how to get to that menu, it's Control Tab, and this will get you your quick menu here, or you can change it from here. Okay, so let's go ahead and add in the grass as a particle system. So we'll click on New Particle System, change the type to Hair. Okay, I'm going to click on Advanced, and we're going to open up the vertex groups, the render tab, the physics tab, and the velocity tab. Now change this from path to collection, and the collection is going to be the grass. And I like to scale with the normal other than the actual scale option here. I don't know why, I just like scaling with the normal. Doesn't do anything different at all, so we'll just go ahead and do that. Now we're going to increase the Brownian to about a 3 or a 4. This really gives a random scale variation as well. And as well as scale randomness, we're just going to turn that up as well to about, let's just go even at a 0.5. Okay. Now, one thing we need to do with the grass, and you can select any of these, if you had the outliner open, you can select any of these here. And the one thing that we need to turn off, which I think is enabled for a reason, for the translucency of everything. I'll show you what I mean here. So if we go into rendered view mode, okay, the grass is very bright, which is good and accurate, but technically for me it's too bright. It's too weird looking. So I always undo the translucency option from the transmission tab here. Let me just go full mode. I always get rid of this one when working with Eevee. Now if I'm working with cycles, that's a different story. But what I will do is take this and plug it into the subsurface color, and I'll give this about a 0.1 value. That will still enable light to come through, and it'll still make it look like fresh, good, healthy grass. Okay, that's pretty much it. I mean, the rest of it is to honestly bake the lighting. So to bake the lighting in Eevee, if you don't already know, you add in an irradiance volume, and you basically just cover your scene with these tiny little dots. Okay, all these tiny little dots right here. They're basically like little cameras or like little light portals or something. You can increase the amount here of how many you want in each direction. I'll just increase that just by 1 on each. And what we do here in the render tab is this section right here, indirect lighting. For this scene, we really don't need to change much. These are pretty much the settings that I used for the final one that you saw. So let's go ahead and save it. Always save again before you do this, and you just click on Bake in Direct Lighting, and the little progress tab will come up. Depending on your computer and other stuff, depending on the resolution of the scene, I think something like that, it'll take as long as it needs to. But I'll show you what it looks like, and I'll come back in a sec. Okay, so it finished baking, and I don't think a lot changed in this one. The baking more or less helps with indoor scenes. It helps with outdoor scenes, but it's mainly for indoor type environments. But that's pretty much it, guys. You can take this into Photoshop, GIMP, or whatever, render it out, make it look probably even cooler than this, add some contrast, add a little more stuff to it. But that is basically how we got to this shot. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Again, I'll link everything that you need to get started with Megascans down below in the description. I'll also link how to set up Bridge in Blender and how to merge everything together, so that way you can just get all of the Megascans assets that you need straight in Bridge and export it right to Blender. So it's been a while. I'm glad to be back. I'm expecting to do a lot more videos on YouTube, so go ahead and click subscribe if you haven't already, and join me for the next tutorial or video or whatever comes out on the channel, because there's going to be a lot of videos coming out on the channel here. I can't wait for the future. Glad to be back, and I'll see you in the next one.